Ta-da. And this recording will be made available as well as the slides that you're going to see. So you'll have access to this presentation in both forms after the fact. If you have any questions or technical problems, please send me a note directly in the chat. And everyone, please mute yourself at this time. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to share a link to a constant contact evaluation, and we would love your feedback on the conference. So you'll have that to look forward to. Also, I see many of you are doing this, but as we've been asking all day, if you could please just put your name, your organization, and your email in the chat, then we can know who's here. Now, without further ado, today the next presentation, I'm sorry, it's a little loud in here. We've got multiple, you have to share space. Today we're going to hear about the recovered Kentucky social model that serves the least served. And I'm going to toss it over to Tony White to minimize the background noise that's going on and allow him to introduce himself. We're really glad that you're all here. And over to you, sir.
Lenny, thank you so much. I just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone and share, for putting this conference on, to really to uplift and continue to give those of us with lived experience and an opportunity to share and to participate, using data. And really to hopefully to add, encourage, I guess, other operations and practices to include peers in their practice. My name is Tony White, and I am the National Outreach and Engagement Specialist for the Fletcher Group. I am a person who's committed to long-term recovery since July of '03. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for giving us this opportunity to kind of talk about some of the great stuff that we have going on here in Kentucky. The Fletcher Group was created with a HRSA grant and created a Rural Center of Excellence to increase and work with rural communities around the country to increase the capacity and quality of recovery housing in rural communities. And I hope that some of you have an opportunity to go back and take a look at the video of the presentation for the Healing Place, A Miracle on Market Street by Jay Davidson. Basically, when Governor Fletcher, former governor of Kentucky, which the group is, which we're named after, his administration saw because he in the early 2000s, they were looking for a way to address homelessness, and in conjunction with that, if you remember back then, that was the rise in prescription pain pill, addiction, and also I'll use the phrase community manufacture of methamphetamines and the toxins that were being produced by that. And, just the traditional drugs of use that, Kentucky saw that a main driver of homelessness were substance use disorders, alcoholism, and drug addiction. And then, the Kentucky Department of Corrections, just like the other criminal justice entities around the country, saw that the main driver of recidivism and crime was through substance use disorders. And so that the governor brought together his Office of Local Area Development, Kentucky Housing Corporation, and the Department of Corrections. And they said, hey, we have this model that originated at the Healing Place in Louisville, Kentucky, that it began with a mission that we're looking at to provide recovery services and recovery to the homeless men and women of Louisville, Kentucky, that was replicated in the middle, let's say in the mid 90s, at another homeless shelter in Lexington, Kentucky, which is called the Hope Center. And so Governor Fletcher's administration said that, and I should probably start there. I'll get into a little further detail about that later on. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but let's see here. And so we as a Fletcher group, we don't operate any programs. What we do is provide technical assistance and expertise. And again, with communities that are looking to replicate this model with blended funding, and and really just the efficacy and the power of the peer-led, peer-driven social model. And another way to describe it is permanent supportive housing with recovery education. And Governor Fletcher's administration, there are a total of 14 Recovery Kentucky centers in Kentucky right now. 6 of those Recovery Kentucky centers are women's centers, and 8 of those are men's centers, evenly spread throughout the state. And I'll show you a map later on. But they really are based off of the, I'll say, the mothership of the Healing Place and the Hope Centers located in Lexington and Louisville, Kentucky. Again, I kind of spoke about this before. Its inception was a multi-agency teamwork with the Governor's Office of Local Area Development, Kentucky Housing Corporation, which facilitates the Section 8 leases here in Kentucky, the Department of Corrections, the Cabinet of Family and Health Services, all with the willingness to think outside of the box. Really trying to think about his community as method approach that promotes active participation in the peer-based group living. And the residents transition into independent living and long-term recovery. And this is a recovery ecosystem. You can see the different referral sources. From referrals from Department of Corrections for probation or parole, home placement for those that are involved in the criminal justice system that are looking for long-term recovery program. Kentucky's got a great relationship with the drug courts, that if a drug court participant needs a higher level of care, they will make referrals. And this representation, the slide again, life skills development, health and physical and mental supports, education support, all of these are provided, but these services are provided to the residents, the men and women who request them, but in a sequenced manner, based on that individual's willingness as they transition through the program. Which again, helping folks to build recovery capital, and and then again, with opportunities for employment, transportation, housing, and social supports. So, the recovery center, especially in rural communities, all the programs have at least 100 beds. Each center has served as a catalyst to expand services in rural communities. And so each of the centers, the programs are facilitated by a community mental health provider or a nonprofit entity that was created that would facilitate the recovery program operations. And what that is, provide that opportunity has, with these centers being in these rural communities, it has expanded the need for further services, where they be, mental health, therapy, other medications, just by having these centers in these communities, it has helped to expand those services in each one of these communities. And this is just a map of all the centers that are located, and all these images are the presentation is available for everyone. And so, Kentucky has got 6 congressional districts, and they tried as best they could to, and they put an RFP out, with a developer, and then again, a community mental health provider that would be willing to facilitate program operations. And so, yeah, they're just kind of spread evenly all throughout the Commonwealth. And also, this next slide, if anyone would like to contact anyone individually, and then also Mike Townsend is an employee for Kentucky Housing Corporation, and he is the Recovery Kentucky Program Administrator. I tease him and just say he's a Recovery Kentucky czar, but I'll leave that one alone. So this is just, a couple of pictures of WARM, the Women's Addiction Recovery Manor in Henderson, Kentucky. According to the 2020 census, the county residents, there's 44,793 folks living in the county. WARM was the first Recovery Kentucky Center to open in August of 2007. And, they frequently, and let me go back here. Let's see. Bowling Green, Henderson. They're kind of around down in that. Here we go, up north here. And so you've got Indiana, and then also, Illinois. I'll say the folks who facilitate that process in Henderson also have a really good relationship with a lot of folks in Tennessee, and they take referrals from Tennessee also. And so, as you can see, the place is gorgeous. And so this is just kind of representing over the picture on the left represents the entrance where the residents go in and out. And the next slide will be able to describe a little further detail, but what they've set up are actual recovery housing on property for the residents. They're Section 8 based, that the women and their families can transition out of the recovery program, and I'll show this next one, and still be close. As you can see, here's the recovery center over here. This is the cafeteria and the kitchen. There's a community room and some classrooms. There's a couple of 14 or 12-bed dormitories in this section. And then as the women progress through the different stages, which we'll describe later, they transition into 2-person Section 8 sponsored apartments. And all this is taking place here. And then as the women transition and become alumni or in phase 2, again, they can take that Section 8 lease with them and still remain on property and reside in one of these apartments. And also too, unless I'm mistaken, I want to say that the recovery program came first. And so maybe 2008-9 is when this first section of the WARM residence was completed. And since it's Section 8, anyone who qualifies for Section 8 can move in. And there are still families who are living there from when the place still, because it's safe, it's clean, it's that a community of connectedness and purpose and transformation. And then they chose to expand their Section 8 housing over up in the upper right here. And so yeah, all that can take place right on property. And then as the women maybe as they progress in their careers, can transition and back with their families, or again into a house, or wherever their recovery journey has taken them. And so I want to kind of break this down a little bit, and let me reframe this a little bit. I'm going to get ahead of myself. I get excited, y'all. That the The program is a residential, long-term, 6 to 9 month long, peer-led, peer-driven social model, and adapted the slide that was by William White and Tom Hill had used. And I thought this was just a great description of how to kind of lay out the process of this model. And so pre-recovery engagement, recovery initiation and stabilization, recovery maintenance, and then leading to long-term recovery. And so we're going to go with the first and just kind of discussing and trying to describe the basic components of the model. And pre-recovery engagement, just a program pre-screen. And then referrals being made by all those other entities that you saw in the previous slide. Alumni making, saying, hey, man, you know, you're kind of struggling. You know, this place helped save my life. Here's a telephone number, give them a call. Because they're, in thinking about, you know, with the Section 8 and the mission being to serve those who are the least served, and it actually works out that it's best to, if you have nothing or next to nothing, as far as, you know, any kind of material resources, that being, you know, one of the key indicators that you might be ready for this process. And so, yeah, just real simple program pre-screen, call in, a pretty simple that any of the staff can take. And then we're talking about recovery initiation and stabilization. There are three different phases to that. And the first one is called SOS, which is basically, you know, a detox. And depending on the substance, it can go anywhere from, you know, 3 to 5, maybe even up to 10 days. And then the first section is called motivational track 1. And I like to describe that as, so everyone has got gifts. Everyone has got, you know, things that are positive about them. And sometimes in active alcoholism, active substance use disorders, you know, we will take those gifts and use those towards getting the next drink or drug. This is an opportunity with the other peers and the peer social model that to provide an opportunity for the individual to engage and begin to learn how to use their gifts that they were given, all their positive attributes, instead of using those things towards focusing on the next drink or drug and the lifestyle that goes along with that. Can you take those same gifts and direct those things towards your recovery? And the education piece is the Recovery Kentucky programs use recovery dynamics. And those that aren't familiar with it, it is a curriculum to teach 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous out of the big book. But what we try and focus on is not the substance. We try and focus on the condition of the mind, on the obsession of the mind, and to give the solution more power than the actual substance itself. And so so basically it's just in this time, there are classes, recovery education classes for the motivational track 1 and motivational track 2 residents. A morning class, about an hour and a half, break for lunch, and then another hour and a half. And all those, the repetition of the recovery dynamics. And all of those classes are taught by peers. All of those classes are taught by people with lived experience, are using the recovery principles and the steps, and with a sprinkling of their experience to give depth and weight to the material as it's being presented. And so motivational track 2, very low responsibility, real simple. Make your bed, take care of your personal area, which you'll see in a minute. And just requesting that, and, you know, trying to, what the social model the guidelines and the kind of the unspoken kind of rules of the social model. It's set up that as a resident, do you accept the following responsibilities? No big I's or no little U's. And I'll just throw in there one of the meditations that I read earlier this week that I thought applied perfectly is that at the end of the game, the pawn and the king go back into the same box. And that an Italian proverb. And so the application and the motivational tracks, and also in conjunction with SOS, and again, depending upon the substance and the replacement of the old information with the new recovery information and the 12 steps and allowing the residents to discover their own spirituality, just like it's laid out. You get to pick what your conception of a power greater than yourself is, and so all of this providing also a social detox from whatever toxic environment that being homeless and marginally housed. One of the things one of the principles that I personally believe in is that you can't take something away from a human being without replacing it with something else. And so the old lifestyle with the new recovery principles. And so again, these are called motivational tracks for a reason. And just real quick to kind of show you so Safe Off the Street is a representation. So a brand new man or woman comes into the program, they'll be assigned one of these individual bunks, again, for their detox. And then, and it's I guess a domino as residents move on and transition out, that opens up beds and spaces further back into the program. And so, after someone has, had their separation and had their orientation, the men and women are more than willing to move up to a top bunk so their new brother or sister can have access to a lower bunk. And pretty much, and these are, again, just different representations, but this is the same setup for the MT2 residents in the dormitory. And you can kind of see, I don't know if it's because of the black and white, the MT2 looks a little more peaceful than the SOS or MT1 dorm. And that there really is a transition when if anyone ever has an opportunity to come to Kentucky, the programs love showing the place off, love showing off the process. And and if we could facilitate that, we'd be more than happy as a Fletcher group to kind of help everyone with that too. So after the residents, and basically they're working the first 3 steps. And in this model, you're not really considered as being in the program until we're getting into the recovery maintenance stage. And that's, 4 to 6 months on average. And it really is person-centered, that the residents move through the process based on their level of willingness. And it's just based on their level of willingness. And so, phase 1 is one when the residents are really considered as being in the program. And kind of showing the beginnings of the maintenance and really kind of moving into the recovery durability zone with the taking of the steps. And there's a modified therapeutic community meeting that takes place. Go ahead and pop over here. Where the residents are encouraged to hold themselves accountable for maybe actions and deeds that aren't conducive to recovery, and then to practice we're going to love our brothers and sisters to life. That as a resident observes another resident saying or doing something that could be detrimental to their recovery, just simply asking, is what you just said or did or the plan that you have, is that appropriate or inappropriate? And, really to do it in a loving manner, to try and focus on the ask instead of tell, to really focusing on the making of requests versus making of demands. And with the intensive access to the information of the recovery dynamics, there is a common recovery language, hopefully one of spirituality and love and connectedness and purpose, that with that commonality, everyone is on the same page. And then also incorporating, again, and wrapping recovery principles around each of the situations as they might occur. And so the community, the staff, we're having facilitated a lot of these. I'm a former director of the first Men's Recovery Kentucky Center to open in Moorhead, Kentucky in November of 2007. And then the community mental health provider that I worked for was awarded another Recovery Kentucky Center a half hour east in Grayson, Kentucky, and went and opened to that. And then a year ago, April, or almost, it'll be 2 years ago, April, that I started with the Fletcher group. And so really it's, again, the residents will be asked if they have any issues or any concerns, and I issue to hold themselves accountable, or concern that they're concerned about their brother or sister. And there'll be a question and answer period for the individual that is holding themselves accountable, or a question and answer period for the person that has relayed a concern. And then the other residents in the process will come up with blocks of suggestions, recovery related writings or actions to help that individual address their inappropriate behavior. And also, trying to keep in mind what step and what part of the phase one the individual is into, to really make it person-centered. And so just real quick, if I'm working as a resident, if I'm working in the kitchen and I decide at lunchtime I want to go smoke a cigarette or make a phone call, and that puts an undue burden on the other two residents who are working in the kitchen, the community is going to address specifically through recovery principles why what I did was pretty selfish, and and letting the team down. Now, if it's another one of the residents who's working in the kitchen, they could have an entirely different reason for why they did what they did if they did the exact same thing. But why they did what they did would be based on who they are as an individual. And then the community would suss that out. And again, the suggestions would be tailor-made to that individual and why they engaged in the behavior that they did. And so after those blocks of suggestions are put on the board, the whole community votes on whatever block of their numbered suggestions. And whatever the consciousness of the community is, whatever suggestion gets the most votes, the resident who was addressed on the board would be asked if they accept the consequences, and say yes, and then they would get with their peer mentor and sign their consequences. And it's usually, on average, probably about 2 weeks that they have to do the consequences in conjunction with their other program participation. And then that on average, the length of, they have to sign it out on a separate sheet, or maybe a couple nights a week go in the kitchen and help wash dishes. But that there's more, writings on powerlessness, writings on self-will, writings on I am bigger than the rules, writings on, maybe, and each one of these is going to be hopefully anywhere from 250 words to the maximum, in rare occasions, up to 1,000. But again, I think you can also see from the pictures that, the apartments, the 2-person apartments, they have a kitchenette. Since Warm was the first Recovery Kentucky Center to come online, there is a small refrigerator, but some of the later architecture has allowed for a full stove instead of a microwave, and also a full refrigerator. And these amenities in the room are a Section 8 requirement, that if something ever happened with the program, that the building could be repurposed, but we're not going to focus on that. I just didn't want to mention that though. So again, going from phase 1 and the 4 to 6 months and the practice and the taking of the steps, and each resident is encouraged to get a 12-step sponsor, regardless, someone to take them through the steps. And let's see here. Clinical supports are available. Again, mentioned the detox in the beginning, mat therapy, all those services, being part of a community mental health provider, or the nonprofits have established relationships with service providers in each of their areas to provide those services if needed. And then we're just going to try and head towards long-term recovery here, and the residents transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2. So there are 3 different tracks in phase 2. Resident transition from phase 1 to phase 2. There's a phase 2 coordinator that's a staff member, more times than not in each of the centers, with someone in recovery who has actually really been through one of these programs. The resident can request a plan of action to move off property in 30 days. So what they'll do is they'll fill out that plan. But the phase 2 also has a community meeting. And so the resident will present their plan of action to their brothers or sisters in the phase 2 community. And the powerful thing about that is that the other members in the phase 2 have gone through this process with that individual. They know them much better than staff and even some of the peer mentors ever could. And so, the individual will present their plan, and the phase 2 community will say, it's not really that solid. We're going to make some suggestions and present it to us again. Or it might even say that, you're just not ready yet. Or they'll present it and say, bring it back to us in a couple of weeks with these suggestions. Or they could say that's a solid plan, and the date that you have, you're good to go. But we're going to ask you to come back and present it again in 2 weeks, just to make sure that the plans that you presented today are still in place. And it is actually the residents in the phase 2 community who will say whether or not someone's ready to transition out of the program and back in the independent living. Also, well, actually, let me keep going here. The other track of phase 2 is simply your room is turned into your apartment with a Section 8 lease. Go out in the community, find work, and then have a safe place to come back with your brothers or sisters and continue the fellowship, and continue to be in an environment where recovery is strong, and continuing trying on new behaviors and the practice of the steps. And the third portion is that there are the residents who go through the program, and they basically become peer support. We call them peer mentors. And so they are the heart and the core and the engine of the process. The peer mentors are facilitating the classes. The recovery dynamics has got some paperwork that goes along with each step. And the peer mentors are going over that, not as a sponsor, just as a support, as a guide. And the peer mentors are teaching classes. The peer mentors the residents are the ones who are cooking meals, washing each other's clothes, doing housekeeping, taking care of the grounds. And so a peer mentor would be a manager of each of those responsibilities, along with staff oversight. And then the phase 1 residents vote one another into those supervisory positions. And so you'll have a supervisor, and then the other phase 1 residents who are actually, facilitating each one of those job responsibilities. And so the life skills are being taught, the integration, and being able to apply those tools and those skills, real basic, that transition so well back into you know, when whether it be in school, whether it be on a job, but and the peer mentors, if I describe that as they're doing small C case management, and so again, they're, the writing very kind of a quick narrative of each of what of their interactions are with each of the residents when they sit down with them and going through their recovery dynamics, and just there to support. And more than anything else, that I've used the phrase, we've all shown what active alcoholism and drug addiction look like. As a person in recovery, as a peer, this is an opportunity to demonstrate and show what recovery looks like. And also to a reminder too that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. So yeah, and then for the residents to choose to stay in the area because maybe they've the family has moved to where the location is, or they just feel more comfortable staying close in the city, in that community where where their support group is. Those residents that transition out are encouraged to come as peer alumni. Basically, they're encouraged to come back and be sponsors. Open door. We want you guys. We need you guys. We have to have you. The peer alumni are also encouraged to come and teach classes. To use the recovery material as a core, and then to be able to put their lived experience to the principles of recovery. And these are just a quick what some observations have been. HHS has said about the model that works, and SAMHSA, a model of evidence-based program. The Louisville Courier Journal, broad spike in treating prescription drug abuse, and a program of excellence by the United Office on Drugs and Crime. So now I want to kind of get into a little bit of the data. Again, showing that the Recovery Kentucky was created to help Kentuckians recover from substance abuse, which often leads to chronic homelessness. There are currently 18 Recovery Kentucky centers across the Commonwealth, and that's including the 14 Recovery Kentucky centers, and then again the Men's and Women's Hope Center in Lexington, and the original program model in Louisville, Kentucky at the Healing Place. Providing housing and recovery service for up to 2,200 persons simultaneously. Recovery Kentucky is a joint effort by the Kentucky Department of Local Government, Department of Corrections, and Kentucky Housing Corporation. Local governments and communities at each Recovery Kentucky center location have also contributed greatly to making these centers a reality. The overall program is composed of 4 main program components. Trying to watch my time here. I'm just going to say it, that more times than not, that the men's programs, because in facing NIMBY, are seen as more intimidating than the women's programs. And so as a facilitator of a men's program, it has taken a little more community work to kind of to work against some of the just some of the bias and the othering that that folks face with a substance use disorder. So again, I kind of rolled through these pretty quick before. Again, the safe off the streets component, the motivational tracks 1 and 2, and then also really delineating that the residents are considered as actually being in the program when they reach phase 1. And the University of Kentucky Center for Drugs and Alcohol Research conducts these studies independently, that the residents are asked, it's either staff can facilitate, can assist with them filling out the initial survey, or if someone is fairly computer illiterate, and they can computer access will be provided for them to fill out the survey, and then there are some centers that will roll with a paper copy, and then the staff will just go ahead and enter their data. based on what the resident has filled out. And so let's go ahead here. Yeah, the behavioral outcome studies at the University of Kentucky Center of Drug and Alcohol Research, UKCDAR, independently conducts recovery center outcome study, HRSA, which is an annual outcome evaluation that includes 17 of the 18 recovery Kentucky centers that participate in the HRSA's fiscal year, and that was for 2020. Let's see here. The recovery center staff conduct an intake interview when the clients enter phase 1 after completing SOS and MT1 and MT2 to assess behaviors and problems clients had prior to entering the recovery center. Follow-up interviews are then conducted over the telephone by an interview at UKCDAR with eligible consenting RCOS clients 12 months after phase 1 entry. A random sample of eligible clients stratified by the target month based on intake month and gender was selected. Client responses are kept confidential to facilitate the honest evaluation of client outcomes and program services. This findings at a glance report summarizes outcomes for 280 men and women who participated in a Recovery Kentucky Center program, completed phase 1 intake interview between July 18 and June 19, and a follow-up interview between July 2019 and June 2020. At intake, most clients included in this report were white, 92%, not currently married or cohabitating, 87%, predominantly female at 51%, and on average, 35 years old. And then again, if you guys would like more information on that, you can contact Mike Townsend. And then also there was, when this was conducted, one of the last recovery center to come online didn't have enough actual eligible residents for their data to be added to the study. And so just some findings at a glance. At intake, the reported illegal drug use at intake was at 88%. And then at that year follow-up from entry into phase 1 was down to 11%, where there was a reduction of 87.5%. Reported opioid use, and that does include fentanyl and carfentanil and the pill forms of opiates. At intake at 58%, and follow-up 5% with a reduction of 91.3%. Reported heroin use, 43% at intake, 4% at follow-up, and then a reduction of 90.6% was again the relevant change. And I'm not gonna bore you guys with going through all these. I guess it can show significant decreases in some of the conditions that go along with an active substance use disorder, and then a follow-up. But reported attending a mutual help recovery meeting in the past 30 days. From 33% at intake up to 80%. That would have been an increase of 142%, 142.4%. And basically, the estimated cost savings for taxpayers at every dollar that has gone into a Recovery Kentucky Center has been $2.50 savings in the reduction to criminal justice involvement, interventions with social services, hospital, emergency room or hospital visits, all those, kind of the social services that go along with, again, that, helping folks to find a pathway to recovery. Again, let's not forget about alcohol, and at intake reported any alcohol use at 42% and 6% at follow-up, with a reduction in 85.7%. Reported alcohol intoxication at intake was 38%, 4% at follow-up, with a reduction in 98.4%. And reported binge drinking upon intake versus follow-up, that was a reduction of 94.5%. And again, the notes here, 42 individuals were not included in the analysis of change in substance use from 6 months before entering the recovery center to the 6 months before follow-up because they reported being incarcerated the entire period measured at intake. No individuals reporting being incarcerated the entire 6-month period before follow-up. Again, a note. This is just a note designating the for the previous slide, the misuse of opioids other than heroin, including prescriptions, opiates, methadone, buprenorphine, or naloxone. And then there's a fourth note about the stimulants and stimulants being included: amphetamine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, and Ritalin. Another trend from the report, how much has opioid and methamphetamine use changed over time? And so going all the way back to 2010, and I think this is one of the great things that, got this historical data, with the University of Kentucky facilitating these studies. Again, this trend analysis examines the percent of our cost clients who reported misuse of prescription opioids, and non-prescription methadone, non-prescribed buprenorphine, naloxone, heroin, and methamphetamine in the 6 months before entering the program from fiscal year 2010 to fiscal year 2019. And I'm pretty sure that that'll be pretty. I'm hoping that that's not just it will be pretty consistent throughout the country. And seeing some of the rise and fall and the kind of switching out of the different substances that are affecting folks. Trends in depression and or generalized anxiety. The number of clients meeting criteria for depression or generalized anxiety in 6 months before entering the recovery center has fluctuated from a little less than 3/4, 72%, to 87% over the past 7 fiscal years. Each year, there's been a significant decrease in intake to follow-up and the number of clients reporting either depression or generalized anxiety, with the lowest percentage of follow-up at fiscal year 15 at 7% and the greatest in fiscal year 2019. Let's see. Past 30-day physical health. Average number of days of physical health was not good. 10.2% at intake and 2.6 of follow-up. That reduction in really better days. 74.5%. The average number of days mental health was not good. At intake 18%, 3.10, and follow-up. Again, reporting a good number here with 72.7%, and chronic pain at intake, and then at 19%. Again, with that reduction of being 29%, 29.6%, making some improvements. Past 6-month economic indicators reported by the residents. Employed at least 1 month at intake 44% and 75% at follow-up, with an increment that an increase of 70.4%. And then again, there we go, the gender wage gap. Can't not recognize that. For every dollar dollar makes a man makes, it's 20 cents less for women. Trends in employment by gender. And let's see. It looks like 2018 and 19 kind of fallen off. It was falling off for both groups really at intake, but definitely some significant increases due to recovery center participation and folks being on the road to long-term recovery. Trends in self-reported homelessness. Here we go. On average, about 1/3 of clients entering phase 1 of the recovery center reported that they were homeless in the 6 months before entering the program. From fiscal year 2013 to fiscal year 2015, the percent of people reporting homelessness at intake increased, and has remained stable from 15 to 19. The percentage of people reporting hopelessness of follow-up decreased from 13 to 15. And it had a slight increase in 17, 5%, but then doubled in fiscal year 2018 to 10%, with a reduction to 6% in fiscal year 2019. So providing a pathway to recovery, stabilization, connectedness of purpose, independent living. Past 6 month criminal justice involvement, at intake 66%, and at a follow-up 6%. Reported being incarcerated, 84% at intake and 13% at follow-up. And that, you know, there are some residents within the criminal justice system that will be referred to a center. They will do their program participation, and there are some judges and courts that will mandate that they have to come back and do their jail time. But more times than not, those residents do make it through that. Yeah, I know, Lenny. They do make it through that and maintain their recovery. And I know it's horrendous, but but again, this next point here: reported criminal justice supervision at intake 79% and 64%, which is going to be pretty much on average when you're looking at folks having so we're having to report to a probation officer. But I will sum it up this way. In the cities where there is a Recovery Kentucky Center and a probation officer gets assigned to that center, that is their main caseload. If a probation officer moves from that office and the other probation officers, they basically fight to have that caseload because the power of transformation that takes place with recovery, and at the very least, they know where someone is and what they're doing and the services that they're receiving. And then also, I guess for lack of a better phrase, for the center to build a really good, solid relationship with the probation officer who was willing to at least try and incorporate recovery principles, that can be a powerful member of the treatment team too. So it's all about partnership and building relationships. So recovery supports. Reported attending a mutual help recovery meeting in the past 7 days at intake 30%, 33%, and that's up to 80% with an increase of 142.4%. Now, and what would be the most useful in staying off drugs or alcohol at intake and a follow-up? Folks, especially with this being Kentucky in the South, first thing that the majority will say faith or religion, 39% from supports from others in recovery, and 26% from supports from family and friends. In a follow-up, the residents reported that 23% support from family and friends, 18% from support from others in recovery, and 16% from self-help recovery meetings. And I kind of have an opinion. I think a lot of the time the recovery principles get so deeply ingrained that you don't even really think to say going to meetings and having a sponsor and fellowship and practicing this new way of life. It's become such a big part of someone but that's just me putting my 2 cents in there. So take that with a grain of salt, y'all. Past 6 month multidimensional recovery. The multidimensional recovery measure uses items from the intake and follow-up surveys to classify individuals who have had all positive dimensions of recovery. The positive dimensions of recovery include having no active substance use disorder, being employed full-time or part-time, not being homeless, having no arrests or incarceration, having no suicidal thoughts or attempts, having fair to excellent health, having recovery support, and having a mid to high quality of life. And, 0% at intake and up to 58% at follow-up. So return on the investment in recovery center services, estimates of the cost per drug user and alcohol or other users were applied to the sample to examine the total cost of drug and alcohol abuse to society in relation to expenditures on Recovery Kentucky program. The cost savings analysis suggests that for every dollar invested in recovery services, there was an estimated $2.50 return in avoided costs, i.e. costs to society that would have been expected, given the costs associated with drug and alcohol use. And conclusion, overall Recovery Kentucky program clients made significant strides in all of the targeted areas and have much more support for their recovery after participating in recovery services. In addition, the Recovery Kentucky program has saved taxpayer dollars through avoided costs to society, or costs that would have been expected based on the rates of drug and alcohol use. And then, the folks at the University of Kentucky CEDAR that have put in all this work, the thousands of calls that they've made themselves or that they facilitated in trying to get in contact to do the follow-up surveys, they really do a lot of hard work year after year after year. And if interested, these are some of the potential partners: the local government, service delivery agencies, criminal justice departments of community health, corrections, behavioral health, and developmental disabilities, community affairs, housing authorities, faith-based initiatives, private sectors, employers, and others. We are in this together. And I forget which center this last one is from, but the ladies seem like pretty happy, and it's kind of open it up for a Q&A.
Thank you. Can we give a virtual holla? Thank you very much. That was fantastic. We do have time for some Q&As really quickly, just a little housekeeping. This is the end of the presentations for the day. At 5 o'clock, there is a final wrap up. If you would like to go, that's in the conference program. It's in the Unity room. And among the other things I'm sure that will be discussed are 2 upcoming conferences that are part of this peer workforce initiative that SHARE is involved in. The first one is the Western Recovery Conference, March 12th and 13th. And then in April, late April, the 27th, we're hosting the Peer Supervision Conference, and you are all invited to submit proposals for both of those. Really hope that you'll consider it. Thanks so much for attending today. You are welcome to hang out in this room and have Q&A up until 5 o'clock. So I may dip out, but I welcome all of you to converse as you will. Thanks very much for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you all here.
Thank you, Lenny. Any questions?
There aren't any in the chat, so the floor is open if anyone would like to unmic.
It was a very thorough presentation. So it's possible that you've answered any and all questions that might have come up.
That would be a first. or I went through it and it didn't make any doggone sense, and it just confused everyone. So
that's
well, guys, thank you so much for your time and attention. And again, there's my contact information, and also too, I can't express that really let's see. Again, if you have an opportunity to go back and take a look at Jay Davidson's presentation about Miracle on Market Street, because that he really was one of the main founders of the process that was so effective. The Kentucky saw its effectiveness, and then their willingness to replicate this model around the state. And then us as Fletcher Group. And yeah, again, I'm biased because the thing saved my life, but this diamond that we have that we're just hoping to be able to share with other communities. Its cost effectiveness and its ability to help people find recovery, and especially the homeless and those with criminal justice involvement.
I just had a last minute thought right now. When you mentioned homelessness, and the figure popped in my mind that 25% of all homeless individuals in the United States are out here in California. And I'm wondering what percentage of people, I don't know where they're coming from. I'm involved with a homeless coalition out here. I have a meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I'm still in the learning phase myself. But yeah, it just popped in my mind. I wonder how many people, let's just say they're homeless there, they come here, what percentage of where are they migrating from? That's one of the thoughts. And I'm happy to say, or personally disclose, I have a sponsee who's from Louisville, and he just got a year 2 days ago. So yeah, I hope to visit there myself sometime soon for the food, for the soul food.
There you go. Yeah, come on down, man. Come on over. I'm in Moorhead. We're 2 hours east. Would love to. Let me say this. Again, I can explain it, but there's just something, we describe it as we love visitors, and it's just the community and being there, and the ability to talk to the residents, and especially the peer mentors, and let them share their experience when facilitating tours. It's just something that really, it's just something you have to experience. And we like to call it, we want folks to come and dip you in the sauce. So again, if you want to do, again, the contacts for each individual center are in there, depending on what area. If you do get to Kentucky, or you have my contact information, and we as Fletcher Group would love to facilitate those tours after, I guess I'll just add this, after it's not so COVID-y. So.
Appreciate that. Right on. Thank you.
Tony, you had mentioned something about the men's program being more intimidating than the women's program. Did I hear that correctly? I missed that.
You did. I mean, think about it. You've got, well, one of the components of the model is, and I didn't maybe not explain that, for the motivational track 1 and motivational track 2, is that the program will partner with more times than not with a church or some community entity that is willing to let the program have a space for their recovery classes to teach the recovery dynamics. And so the residents are leaving in the morning about 9 o'clock, and no more, try and have it be no more than 2 miles away. And so the residents will walk to that class. And so, and which is, I mean, if you think about it, it's either a couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks that exercise is already built into the program. You're up at the time of day where everybody, well, most responsible people are up. I'm not going to say all, because there are plenty of responsible people that work at night, but it's kind of changing that dynamic from I guess for lack of word, the debauchery that goes on with the lifestyle of active alcoholism and substance use disorders, that getting someone on a more regular daytime schedule. And so when you've got a group of women going through town versus a group of men, the group of men, society-wise, is just a little more intimidating than the women are.
I see. Thank you.
Sorry. So yeah, I know. So see, I'm sorry. You asked me what time it was, and I told you how to build a watch. I apologize.
No worries, all good. Thank you.
If it's okay with everyone, I'm going to stop the recording.